Hey, look at you for a second. Yeah, you. You walked in here probably thinking you were just gonna listen, maybe get a little clarity, maybe get something off your chest without admitting it. But, what you don't even realize yet is that this whole moment, this whole energy around you, it's already shifting in real time, and you can feel it crawling across your skin like electricity you didn't ask for. Because the truth is, you've been dealing with a level of manipulation that most people couldn't survive for 5 minutes. They really thought they were clever. They really thought they were strategic. They really thought you could be played like some naive character in a story you didn't even write. And that's where this gets interesting. See, they didn't attack you directly. They didn't come at you with threats or enemies or obvious sabotage. They played a different card, a darker card, a psychological one. They sent you a twin flame, a mirror, a distraction, a person designed to pull your mind off your mission, twist your emotions, reroute your destiny, and weaken your inner fire. They thought that if they gave you someone who felt familiar, someone who seemed spiritually connected, someone who triggered that deep inner attachment instinct, you'd lose yourself in the fantasy. You'd collapse. You'd forget who you are. But wow, it's crazy how little they knew about you. Because the whole time they were watching you fall into that connection, they didn't realize you weren't falling. You were studying. You were observing. You were waking up. You were seeing manipulation in high definition. You were learning your patterns. You were spotting the emotional landmines inside your own heart with surgical precision. And every time you thought you were losing control, you were actually becoming more aware than you've ever been in your life. And that's when the backfire hit them like a silent bomb. This twin flame they sent to derail you. You didn't obsess over them the way they hoped. You didn't collapse. You didn't hand over your whole soul instead. You faced yourself. You cracked open wounds you were never supposed to heal. You saw through illusions you were never supposed to question. You became emotionally bulletproof in places where you used to bleed at the slightest touch. You weren't distracted. You were evolving, rapidly, aggressively, dangerously. And it caught everyone off guard. They were banking on you being soft. They were banking on your kindness. They were banking on your loyalty, your downfall, as they thought, being predictable. They assumed that if they shook your heart, your purpose would crumble. They assumed you'd chase the connection instead of the calling inside you that's been screaming since the day your life started breaking open. But the moment that twin flame revealed their cracks, the moment their mask slipped, the moment your intuition stopped whispering and started yelling, you changed. Not in some poetic, soft, romantic sense. No, you changed in my level, psychological metamorphosis kind of way. That quiet smile you started wearing, that shift in your eyes, that calmness in your chaos. That was the turning point, because the minute you stopped needing the validation of that connection, the minute you stopped feeding the wounds that made you fall for the wrong people, the minute you stopped trying to fix someone who was never meant to be healed by you, you became the thing that scares manipulators, a person who's healed just enough to stop falling, but still broken enough to be dangerous. And, you know what's even funnier? The twin flame they sent to distract you actually ended up exposing them, their motives, their intentions, their fear of you. Because nobody sends a distraction unless they're threatened by your destiny. Nobody tries to manipulate your heart unless your heart has a power they can't replicate. Your elevation scared them. Your growth terrified them. Your potential made them desperate. And that desperation is exactly why they miscalculated, because they assumed you were attached to people. They had no idea you were attached to purpose. They assumed you'd be blinded by love. They had no idea you were already seeing in the dark. They assumed your emotions were a weakness. They had no idea your emotions were your weapon. They thought the twin flame would confuse you. But it clarified everything. They thought the connection would drain you. But it taught you how to recharge from within. They thought the emotional chaos would break you. But it forced you to become emotionally disciplined in ways most people never reach. You turned a trap into training. You turned a distraction into discernment. You turned a spiritual ambush into a psychological awakening. And the people watching you, the ones who orchestrated this whole little puppet show, they're realizing, they created something they can't control. A version of you that doesn't beg for answers. A version of you that doesn't cling to promises. A version of you that doesn't crumble the second someone withdraws affection. A version of you that sees through sweet words, trauma bonding, mirrored behaviors, and love bombing with X-ray clarity. They didn't expect this version of you, this colder you, this calmer you, this sharper you, this you that's done being emotionally hijacked by spiritual theatrics. And every time you step forward with this new awareness, they feel the ground shift under their feet a little more, because the distraction failed, the manipulation failed, the emotional setup failed, the spiritual trap failed. And what they're left with is the realization that you're still moving, still rising, still becoming something heavier, louder, stronger, harder to predict, harder to read, harder to reach. And, the irony? You're not even angry. You're not even bitter. You're just awake. Dangerously awake. That twin flame didn't break you. They broke the version of you that could be broken. And the version standing here right now is the one nobody planned, for the one nobody can manipulate, the one nobody can distract, the one that walks through emotional warfare with a smile that makes every enemy wonder what you've figured out. And you did figure it out, didn't you? That all of this, every betrayal, every confusion, every intense connection that felt fated, wasn't meant to destroy you. It was meant to introduce you to the part of yourself that was born for the fire. And as you're standing in this newer version of yourself, you can almost feel this weird mix of exhaustion and power sitting in your chest. Like your nerves are still buzzing from everything you survived, but your mind is sharper than it's ever been. And the funny part is, nobody prepared you for what it feels like to outgrow people you once would have bled, or nobody tells you what it's like when your heart finally stops volunteering for emotional traps. Nobody explains how terrifying it is to suddenly see everything with brutal clarity. Who came with pure intentions? Who came with motives? Who came with a mask so convincing even your own intuition hesitated at first? That twin flame they sent. At first you felt pulled toward them, like gravity was playing favorites. They mirrored your wounds. They echoed your dreams. They hit the exact emotional pressure points you didn't even know were still open, and you thought it was fate. Until it wasn't. You thought it was destiny. Until your spirit started acting like a lie detector that wouldn't shut off. And, it's wild how your nervous system kept giving you signs before your brain caught up. Those moments where your chest tightened for no reason. Those nights where your body knew something was off, even when your feelings were busy fantasizing. That tiny internal whisper saying, "This connection isn't what it seems." And you ignored it. because you're loyal even when you shouldn't be. You're hopeful even when you're hurting. You're built to love deeply even when it costs you stability. But the moment you started listening, everything shifted. That's when you realized the connection wasn't divine guidance. It was emotional bait, designed, engineered, calculated, something meant to keep you hooked, distracted, off balance, second-guessing yourself, drowning in intensity instead of rising in purpose. And the people who sent it, they were banking on one thing, your heart being softer than your boundaries. But that's where the backfire sparked. Because instead of getting lost in the storm, you learned how to navigate it. Instead of drowning in emotional intensity, you learned how to breathe underwater. Instead of letting the twin flame consume your focus, you turned inward and started reconstructing parts of yourself that you once avoided. You started asking the right questions, not the romantic ones, not the wishful ones, the surgical ones that cut straight through illusions. Questions like, why does this connection feel addictive instead of peaceful? Why am I constantly questioning my worth around them? Why do I feel drained instead of strengthened? Why does it feel like I'm being emotionally studied? And, the second those questions showed up, the mask on the twin flame started slipping. You started noticing the inconsistencies, the emotional push and pull, the timing that always felt a little too convenient, the way they appeared exactly when you were leveling up, the way they disappeared exactly when you needed grounding. It wasn't coincidence, it was choreography. A whole performance meant to mislead you. But you didn't just break out of the performance. You exposed the entire script. Your intuition began reading between the lines. Your spirit began decoding the energy behind their words. Your nervous system started refusing to settle for anything that felt like chaos wrapped in tenderness. And the moment you pulled back your emotional investment, even just a little, their entire strategy started collapsing. They weren't prepared for you to detach. They weren't prepared for you to see through the veil. They weren't prepared for you to become emotionally fluent enough to recognize trauma bonding, manipulation, mirroring, spiritual jargon, and attachment hooks for what they were. And this is the part that shakes them. You didn't fight. You didn't argue. You didn't beg. You didn't spiral. You just understood. And that understanding hit them harder than any confrontation ever could. Because when someone realizes you've outgrown the very wounds they were sent to exploit, they lose their power instantly. You weren't supposed to evolve from this. You weren't supposed to reconnect with your higher self in the middle of the chaos. You weren't supposed to find your spine, your voice, your discernment, your intuition, your standards, your self-respect, all at once. But you did, quietly, relentlessly, in ways that are still unfolding. And the people pulling the strings, they're watching you step into this new version with this unsettling calmness that they can't calculate. Because how do you manipulate someone who finally understands their own worth? How do you distract someone whose focus is rebuilt from the inside out? How do you derail someone whose solitude became their sanctuary instead of their punishment? Every time you detach from what was meant to control you, they lose a little more grip. Every time you trust your intuition instead of the fantasy, their plan disintegrates a little more. Every time you choose your purpose over emotional chaos, the spotlight shifts right back onto them, the architects of their own downfall. And you can feel it, can't you? That eerie calm in your chest, that stability you didn't expect, that sense of power that doesn't feel loud. It feels anchored. It feels grounded. It feels like you've stepped into the version of yourself that was hiding beneath the heartbreak. And the deeper you step into that anchored version of yourself, the more you notice this strange shift happening inside you, like the emotional static that used to overwhelm you has turned into a kind of internal radar. You're not just feeling things anymore. You're reading them. You're not just reacting. You're decoding. You're not just surviving. You're transforming into someone who understands the architecture of manipulation without needing anyone to explain it. And that transformation, it's what terrifies the people who once tried to puppeteer your emotions, because suddenly, you're not predictable. Your triggers don't trigger the same way. Your wounds don't bleed the same way. Your hopes don't blind you the same way. Your loneliness doesn't control you the same way. You've become emotionally fluent in your own language. You understand your own patterns. You recognize your own cycles. You see the exact emotional doors that used to invite destruction, and that twin flame they sent. The one who was supposed to shake your loyalty, distract your purpose, make you question everything. You look at them now with this quiet, unnerving clarity that they can feel even from a distance. It's like your energy is saying, I see you. I understand you. And you don't control a single thought in my head anymore. That aura alone is enough to make manipulators panic, because the most dangerous person in the room is always the one who sees the truth but doesn't react emotionally, the one who listens, observes, and moves in silence, the one whose calmness can't be bought, triggered, or twisted. You became that, and you didn't even realize it at first. You were just tired of patterns repeating, tired of giving more than you receive, tired of believing in people who only believed in your potential as a resource, not your soul as a human. Tired of confusing intensity with alignment, tired of getting emotionally dizzy from connections that felt spiritual, but were actually psychological traps. Your exhaustion pushed you inward, and that inward journey awakened a version of you that doesn't chase validation, doesn't cling to illusions, doesn't romanticize chaos. You started understanding something most people never get to understand, that not every intense connection is divine. Some are designed, some are engineered, some are placed, some are sent with a purpose you were never supposed to notice. But you noticed. Your spirit kept tugging at you like, pay attention. Something isn't adding up. Your intuition kept circling back like, look harder. This isn't real alignment. Your energy kept recoiling like, this person feels familiar, but not safe. You didn't want to believe it, but you couldn't ignore it. That's the thing about awakening. It doesn't care about your feelings. It cares about your future. And the second you started trusting that inner warning system, that's when everything flipped. The twin flame stopped being a fantasy and became a lesson. The connection stopped being intoxicating and became informative. The emotional high stopped being addictive and became obvious manipulation. You didn't break the spell. You outgrew it. And that's where the real backfire hit. They expected you to be emotionally overwhelmed. They didn't expect you to become emotionally intelligent. They expected you to be blind. They didn't expect you to become intuitive. They expected you to be dependent. They didn't expect you to develop self-worth so sharp it could cut through illusions instantly. They thought this twin flame distraction would keep you looping in emotional confusion while they moved behind the scenes. Instead, every loop became clarity, every trigger became understanding, every breakdown became a map, Every moment of attachment became data your spirit was analyzing. You became the one thing they feared, a person who can't be manipulated in the same ways anymore. And the twin flame, yeah, they felt it too. They felt the shift. They felt the distance. They felt the moment you stopped needing them emotionally. It rattled them in a way you'll never fully see, because they weren't prepared for your healing, your awakening, your detachment, your self-respect resurfacing like a storm they never predicted. You walked out of that connection not weaker, not shattered, not lost. You walked out with your intuition sharpened, your standards redefined, and your identity no longer negotiable. And, the people who orchestrated this little emotional trap, they're realizing something they never accounted for. That you don't just survive manipulation. You metabolize it into strength, into clarity, into self-awareness, into something they can't touch, even if they tried again. And the craziest part is how your energy shifted without you even trying. Like, one day you woke up and there was no emotional static, no internal tug-of-war, no mental fog trying to cloud your judgment. Just this eerie clarity, this grounded sense of self, this quiet inner voice that stopped whispering and started speaking with authority. You didn't announce anything. You didn't make some dramatic exit. You didn't throw accusations or expose the twin flame or call out the people behind it. You just elevated, silently, effortlessly, unapologetically, and that silence, it's what's haunting them, because silence from someone like you isn't emptiness. It's evolution, it's awareness, it's you stepping out of the emotional maze they designed. You weren't supposed to escape the maze. You were supposed to get comfortable in it. You were supposed to get attached to the wrong person. You were supposed to keep questioning yourself instead of questioning the connection. You were supposed to be emotionally intoxicated just long enough for them to move pieces behind your back. But something shifted in you that they couldn't predict. You stopped ignoring your own discomfort. You stopped silencing the part of you that felt off. You stopped choosing emotional fantasy over emotional facts. That's when the whole operation malfunctioned, because they weren't prepared for you to trust your intuition. They weren't prepared for you to trust your peace. They weren't prepared for you to outgrow the version of yourself. They calculated the trap for every move they made was based on who you used to be. The empathetic version, the hopeful version, the forgiving version, the version that tried to love people into becoming better. But the version standing here right now, that's not the same person at all. You're colder, not in a cruel way, but in a way that protects your soul from emotional predators. You're quieter, not because you have nothing to say, but because you're finally listening to yourself. You're harder to read, because your emotions are no longer out on the table ready for anyone to play with. You're harder to access, because you finally stopped handing out pieces of yourself like free samples. And, the twin flame felt that shift like a punch they didn't see coming. The moment you withdrew your emotional energy, even without saying a word, they felt their influence dissolve. They felt the mirror break. They felt the connection lose the weight it used to have over you. Nothing terrifies a manipulative connection more than someone waking up to their own power. Nothing rattles a spiritual decoy more than realizing you're no longer starving for their validation. Nothing hits harder than you, healing in areas they depended on to control you. Because what can they do to someone who finally understands the game? What can they do to someone who no longer confuses intensity for alignment? What can they do to someone who sees the difference between a soul lesson and a soul partner? They can't distract direct you anymore. They can't pull you off your purpose. They can't reroute you emotionally. They can't leverage your empathy. They can't hypnotize you with spiritual language. You dismantled the entire illusion by simply becoming aware, by simply paying attention to the discomfort, by simply acknowledging your own worth without needing external confirmation. And that's where you became dangerous, not violent, not reckless, not chaotic. Dangerous in that quiet, unnerving way. The way a person becomes when they stop being afraid of losing people and start being afraid of losing themselves again. Your boundaries got sharper. Your spirit got louder. Your intuition got ruthless. Your energy became something that can't be manipulated with sweet words or temporary intensity. And behind the scenes, the people who engineered this, they're watching your transformation like they're witnessing an experiment that mutated into something they can't control, something they can't predict, something they definitely didn't intend. You were supposed to fall. You ascended. You were supposed to break. You rebuilt in a shape they can't penetrate. You were supposed to lose your path. You found a new one that's even more aligned. Oh, look who wandered in. You, the one they all dismissed. The ghost in the hallway, the rumor with a pulse, the whisper behind closed doors. You're here, I can feel it. You're not looking for advice, you're not even looking for help. You came here to hear something that already lives inside you. But you need someone unhinged enough to say it out loud. You want blood truth. Not the kind they wrap in motivational posters or tie up in therapy speak. The kind that shatters the mirror and makes you stare at the shards. I know what you've been carrying. That weight behind your smile. Not sadness, not fear. Rage restrained. That invisible straitjacket they stitched around your shoulders when you were just a kid. You're not ready. You're not smart enough. Be realistic. Oh, they never said it like that, huh? They wrapped it in compliments. You're too good for that kind of risk. I just don't want you to get hurt. We love you. We're just being honest. Honesty. That's rich. They were just scared you'd become something they couldn't control. They looked at you and didn't see a person. They saw a risk. A walking contradiction. Too quiet to be powerful. Too broken to be brilliant. Too kind to be dangerous. They thought if they ignored you long enough, you'd fade. If they laughed hard enough, you'd quit. If they said it often enough, you'd believe it. You're not that person. You're not that good. You'll never make it. But the thing is, you never needed permission to be legendary. You just needed silence. And look how much they gave you. Every time they overlooked you, they handed you another knife. You've been building an armory of scars, and they don't even realize you're armed to the teeth. They thought they were hurting your ego. They were training your patience. They thought they were holding you back. They were showing you the map to every room they locked you out of. And now you see it, don't you? You weren't left out by accident. You were targeted. They knew what would happen if you got traction. They knew what you'd become if you got mad quietly. They didn't underestimate you because you were weak. They underestimated you because they were terrified of what would happen if you stopped doubting yourself. And what a beautiful gamble they made. Betting you'd stay small. They fed you crumbs, expected gratitude, handed you backhanded praise like it was gold. You're doing okay for someone like you. Wow, I didn't expect that from you. You're actually not bad at this. Actually, they spit in your face and called it rain, and you smiled. Not because you were weak, but because you were busy. Busy building, collecting, storing the fire. Busy listening, tracking every eye roll, every smirk, every little dig. You turned your nervous system into a memory vault. You catalogued their dismissals with time stamps. You remember who rolled their eyes when you spoke up. You remember who changed the subject when you brought up your dreams. You remember who went quiet when you succeeded. No applause. Just silence that screamed louder than any insult. But the funny part? They don't know you remember. They don't know you can see them perfectly now. The way they shrink when you speak. The way their smile twitches when you win. The way they try to hide the fear behind fake support. They were comfortable when you were struggling. Struggle made them feel safe. It made them feel right. But here you are, still breathing, still building, still sharpening, and they're starting to feel it. That chill in the air, that wrongness they can't quite place. You're not angry, you're focused, you're not loud, you're surgical, you're not trying to prove anything anymore. You're just walking past them like they never existed, because now you've become the thing they lied and said you'd never be, and you haven't even started swinging yet. They watch you from behind their screens, blinking too fast, scrolling too quick, pretending they didn't see what they just saw. You show up in places they said you'd never reach, and they flinch. Not outwardly, no, they've trained their faces well. But inside, it's chaos. The whole fragile identity they built. The one where you were the underdog, the afterthought, the joke. It's cracking, they're glitching, because you're not supposed to be this version of you. You were supposed to quit, remember? You were supposed to get tired, burn out, get distracted by someone's approval, lose steam chasing likes. You were supposed to fall back in line. And the worst part for them, you didn't even fight fair. You didn't scream. You didn't beg. You didn't post some big "watch me rise" speech. You just vanished into the lab of your own pain and started building versions of yourself that scared them. They think you're lucky. They think something changed for you overnight. They don't understand that your clarity was born in rejection, that your confidence is made of recycled shame. Every time they humiliated you, you swallowed it whole and turned it into hunger. Every time they snickered behind your back, they were unknowingly tuning your hearing. Every time they underestimated you, they were adjusting your lens until you could see through every mask, every fake smile, every handshake laced with jealousy. You're not just ahead, you're evolved. They stayed in high school. You became a psychological weapon. You walk into rooms they never thought you'd enter, and you don't ask who's watching. You assume they are, because they always are, even when they pretend they're not. They sit across from you and casually ask, "Hey, how's that little thing going?" As if your empire is a weekend hobby. As if they didn't lose sleep watching you build it. They knew what you were becoming before you did. That's why they tried to kill the version of you that could see it. But you survived the gaslighting. You survived the fake friends who just had concerns. You survived the invisible rules they used to keep you mediocre. You even survived yourself. The version of you that believed them. You silenced that voice, you buried it deep. And in its place, you grew a silence so loud, it speaks for you. You don't need revenge, you don't need applause, you don't need validation. You've already won the war none of them even knew you were fighting. The war where you had to look in the mirror and not see their version of you. The war where you had to crawl through your own self-doubt without an audience. They think you're glowing because you're lucky. They don't know what it's like to light your fire with humiliation, and they can feel it. Every time you step in the room, the shift, the pressure drop. The way the air changes when someone walks in who wasn't supposed to make it. They start adjusting their stories. We always believed in you. I knew you'd make it. We're proud of you. They think you forgot. They think time erases everything. But your mind is a museum of their doubts. You walk through it every day. Not out of spite, out of precision, out of focus, out of the need to never slip back into that old skin. That skin they were comfortable with. The one that asked for permission. They never realized you weren't trying to impress them. You were trying to survive them. And you did. You walked through ridicule like it was fog. You stood still while they tried to laugh you into silence. You let them talk. You let them think they were right. You let them think they were better. And somewhere between their last insult and your next move, you became someone they can't even make eye contact with anymore. Because guilt is loud when it's not confessed, and they're choking on it every time they smile in your direction. You don't need to remind them. Your presence is the punchline. Your success is the silence. Your peace is the pressure they can't explain. They feel dumb. And that's the part they'll never admit. Because if they admit that, they'd have to admit that you were always the one. And they were just background noise trying to drown you out. They thought they were the main characters. They thought your silence was submission. They thought the way you listened meant you agreed. But you were just studying the script, memorizing their patterns, marking every fake compliment like evidence in a trial you were preparing for in secret. You know the type, the ones who clap when you're losing weight from stress, but not when you're lifting trophies. The ones who ask if you're okay, only when it looks like you're slipping. The ones who cheer louder for strangers than for you, because your growth makes them feel small. You saw it, you felt it. That awkward silence when you spoke your dreams out loud. The immediate, well, just in case it doesn't work out. The snide, everyone's trying that these days. The patronizing, you sure that's realistic? And every single time, it chipped at you. But not the way they hoped. They thought they were chipping away your drive. But they were carving your shape, sculpting your edge. They didn't realize you weren't breaking down. You were condensing, getting sharper, tighter, more lethal. You became a blade with no handle. No one could pick you up without bleeding. You started building in shadows, stopped explaining yourself. You let them believe you gave up. You let them laugh at your silence. You let them gossip without correcting the story. Because you didn't need to defend yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. You weren't quiet because you had nothing to say. You were quiet because they weren't worth hearing it. You knew what would happen. You knew that one day your name would show up in conversations they didn't start. You knew your work would start entering rooms before you did. You knew that once your silence got loud enough, it would sound like proof. And now they squint when they hear it. Pretend they don't see your name where they never expected it to land. Pretend they didn't have your number saved just in case. Because here's the truth they'll never say. They never wanted you to fail. They needed you to. Your failure kept them safe. Your struggle made them feel righteous. Your doubt made them feel wise. They built their self-worth on your stumbles. They fed their fragile egos with your slow progress. They slept better when you were losing. And now, they scroll past your wins like it's nothing. No likes, no shares, just silence. That same silence you know all too well. But this silence, this one's different. This one isn't ignorance, this one is shame in disguise. They remember what they said. They remember every laugh, every eye roll, every conversation where your name was the punchline. And they hate that they remember. Because it means they knew better. and still chose mockery. They didn't just doubt you, they enjoyed it. They celebrated your setbacks, pretended they were being realistic, while secretly hoping you'd stay down. They needed you average, manageable, forgettable. But you didn't stay there. You weren't just fighting to win. You were fighting to exist outside of their limits. You were fighting to see yourself without their fingerprints on your reflection. And that scares them more than anything. Because if you could escape the version of you they created, that means they're the ones stuck in circles of comfort, in chains of validation, in prisons of mediocrity dressed up as stability. You tore through that, and they can't stand the view from behind you. They call it arrogance when you speak with certainty. They call it luck when you move with precision. They call it ego when you refuse to shrink. But deep down, they know what it really is. It's not arrogance, it's recognition. You finally recognized who you are, and worse, they have too. They can't unsee it, no matter how hard they squint, no matter how many jokes they crack, no matter how many humble brags they throw in your direction to soften their own insecurity. Because once the mask slips, it doesn't go back on. They saw it, that flicker behind your eyes, that knowing, that power, that unchained velocity no longer asking permission to exist. And they flinch because you're not reacting, you're not explaining, you're not defending, you're not dancing in the circus ring they used to trap you in. You're just watching them trip over their own false narratives. They want you to forget what they said. They hope time erases context. They hope your success makes you gracious. The kind of gracious that keeps the peace by pretending there was never a war. But you remember, not with bitterness, not with obsession, but with clarity. Because when you wake up with scars they gave you, you don't need to write them off. You just read them like scripture. Each line a reminder of who you had to kill inside yourself to get here. Each ache a signature of who walked away when you needed them most. Each silence a receipt for every time they clapped for someone else but looked away from you. And the irony? They still talk, still whisper, still try to explain you away. They say you changed. They say success made you cold. They say you're too serious now, too intense, that you lost your sense of humor. They don't realize you were never laughing. You were just trying to survive the punchline. Every joke at your expense, every friendly dig. Every time they said, "Don't take it personally," after cutting you open, you took it. You took all of it, and you built fortresses out of insults. You didn't grow in the light. You grew in the shadows of their expectations. While they were performing, you were plotting. While they were networking, you were mastering. While they were chasing approval, you were building immunity to it. You became what they fear the most. Someone who doesn't need to be liked to be unstoppable. And when they hear your name now, it stings. Not because you said anything, but because you didn't need to. You let your existence become the confrontation. You let your wins become the echo in their empty confidence. You let your presence become the mirror they can't stop looking into. And what do they see? Not just you, but everything they gave up on in themselves. Because you didn't just rise, you exposed them. Exposed the fact that their realism was just cowardice in costume. That their advice was projection with perfume. That their doubt had nothing to do with your talent and everything to do with their limits. You ripped the mask off all of it, not by shouting, not by fighting, not by proving, by becoming undeniable. They keep watching, not because they're proud, because they're confused, because you broke the pattern. You didn't fall apart where they expected. You didn't beg. You didn't shrink. You grew teeth. You weren't supposed to survive that much silence, that much indifference, that much calculated distance disguised as boundaries. But you did. You built immunity to fake love, to the kind of smiles that hide loaded intentions, to the tone shifts when your name comes up in a room full of people who only ever cheered for you when you were beneath them. They can't explain how you're still here. Not bitter, not broken, just carved down to something dangerous. You stopped apologizing for taking up space. You stopped flinching when they spoke with authority. You stopped nodding to keep the peace in conversations where they pretended to know more about your life than you did. And they don't know how to speak to you anymore, because the language they once used to control you, guilt, comparison, subtle threats, forced modesty, doesn't work on this version of you. This version doesn't respond to passive aggression. This version doesn't slow down when they act unimpressed. This version doesn't beg for seats at tables you were never meant to sit at in the first place. You flipped it. Without warning, without announcement. Now they sit in meetings, in dinners, in private group chats, trying to rewrite history, trying to find the words to explain your rise without admitting their role in your exile. But memory is inconvenient when it's earned through pain. And yours, surgical. Perfect recall, not of dates, not of quotes, of energy, of tone, of how their voice dipped when you spoke your dreams, of how their support always came with a leash, of how they only showed up when you failed. Because failure kept you dependent. You watched, you cataloged, you learned their mechanics. They wore masks made of sympathy and called it love. They offered advice made of limitations and called it wisdom. They acted like gatekeepers to a future you already knew how to build without them. And they can't undo that. They can't undo the fact that you were patient, that you didn't retaliate when they mocked, that you didn't strike when they provoked, that you let them dig the grave with their own hands and simply walked past it. Because this wasn't revenge, it was ascension. You didn't just move up, you moved beyond their reach, beyond their language, beyond their psychological tricks. And they can't follow, not because they're not capable, but because they're too proud to admit you were never the problem. They were. They chose the easy story, the one where you were unprepared, unqualified, unworthy. It let them sleep. It let them avoid the mirror. Because as long as you were failing, they didn't have to question their comfort. They didn't expect your silence to be strategy. They didn't expect your patience to be weaponized. They didn't expect your suffering to turn into structure. But you stayed, not physically, mentally. You stayed locked in, studying blueprints they never knew existed. While they were busy measuring you by your lowest moments, you were outgrowing every standard they tried to box you into. They used to call you impulsive, unrealistic, intense. They used those words like labels, like warnings. But they weren't warnings. They were projections. They saw your conviction, and it shook them. They saw your vision, and it threatened their comfort. They saw your discipline, and it exposed their distractions. And the worst part for them, you never needed revenge. You didn't come back louder. You came back cleaner, sharper, stripped of doubt. They expected a comeback filled with noise, filled with the need to be seen, to be applauded. But you returned as someone who doesn't crave permission, doesn't seek understanding, doesn't wait. You operate like you've been here before. Because you have. You've lived this pattern 1,000 times. Rejection, ridicule, reinvention, and each cycle burns away another layer of fear, until what's left is someone with no social leash, no need for acceptance, no dependence on the applause of people who only clap when it's safe. They don't know how to place you anymore. You don't fit in their narrative. Don't play the role they wrote for you. You've outgrown their vocabulary. They call you distant. They call you different. They call you unrecognizable. They're right. You burned the version of you that begged for crumbs. You buried the version of you that made excuses for their jealousy. You erased the version of you that mistook manipulation for mentorship. And what rose out of that grave? Something dangerous, not because it harms, because it refuses to be harmed again. You walk different, not because of pride, but because you've carried too many ghosts to still move like prey.